Hello, this is Stuart, Strategos Level 3, with another tutorial on how to use MegaMek. And today we're not going to actually look at how to play MegaMek, we're going to look at how to make a map using the inbuilt map editor. So, over here, we've got our map editor, so I'm going to launch that. You get this on the splash screen. And we get straight away into this random map settings. Now you can use this random map settings to make a map that is just completely randomized. It's a bit mad, but really if you want to start a map off from scratch, what's best to do is just to set all of these to none. And that way you'll end up with just a flat plain surface from which to start your map construction from. If you want to just play around with the random settings, you can do that. There's even some more advanced settings on this to enable you to do cities as well and different effects. But for this, we're just going to basically set all of these to none and click OK. And now we get our standard map. Now we could have also, earlier on when we made this map, we could have changed the size. Its default is set as one standard Battletech map board, but you could make a custom map that could be any size. And if you're designing this for a MegaMek scenario, you might, for instance, want to just design it as being a 40 by 40 or whatever multiple of several map sheets, so 32 by 34. But I think sometimes when it comes to designing maps, sometimes it's easier just to design them in 16 by 14 so you can put them together. First thing we've got over here is under theme. If it's blank, you get this normal kind of light terrain color, but you can actually change the themes to several different ones. Now we've got quite a few different ones to choose from. The first one is grass, which is like the grasslands themes. You can see it changes the base color tile. So if I click now, left click on any of the things, I can change that to that particular color. So the different themes you have here are Mars, which looks a bit like the ready maps that you get in the map packs on the red side. You get Volcano, which is a kind of a black ash look. You get Lunar, and you get Snow, and Tropical, not sure if I spelled that one right. Let's do that one again. Oh, that one doesn't seem to be working. Tropical. I think maybe that changes the trees. And that's it. So you've got Mars, Lunar, Volcano, Grass, Snow, and Tropical. So from there, we can actually decide what theme we want to use. Okay, I'm going to just use the default theme. And then you can start designing your map. So the interface over here allows you to change the features which are in a terrain hex. You've got here a drop down menu of all the different features. So you've got arms, which just adds random mech arms to the field. Bridges, and we'll get to that in a minute. Buildings, and lots of different features there. Elevators, fire, fluff, fortified, fuel tanks, which are great fun. Geyser, heavy industry, ice, impassable, which is really good for doing underground maps or some crazy maps like being on a space station. Basically hexes you can't go into. Jungle, random legs, which goes with the arms. You can have legs and arms at the same time. Magma, metal deposits, mud, pavement, planted fields, rapids, roads, rough, lots of different things here. Screen, which I found out is just a smoke beginning at the, similar to smoke basically, these two seem to be the same. I think screen blocks view completely. And finally space, you can just actually have like a space station where areas were completely impassable because they're just basically space, but you can still jump over them. Swamp, tundra, water and woods. So we're just going to look at a few today. We're going to look at how to do like hills, how to do woods and how to do buildings, just as a start, but there's lots of different things you can play with here. So we're going to start first of all by just creating some elevations, and this is going to introduce some of the little techniques you should use as well for how you can construct maps. So in Battletech, if you just play the game like this on a flat board, which some boards can be like, then you're going to have a very long range, range weapons win over everything battle. But if you want to create a few different hills, you can start creating areas where you're cutting lines of fire, where it makes it a bit more tactical, the movement. And so we're going to create a few hills, and what you've got to do is change the elevation. You can go quite far in the elevation, up to 9. I'm just going to start with level 1. And to update the elevation, you've got to hold Control at the same time as you're clicking. If I just click anywhere, it won't update the elevation. And that's quite useful later on. So I'm going to put some basic shaped hills around here. One thing I really like about this is it actually changes the shading slightly. Every different layer has a slightly different shade. So we're going to really just put a few hills here, and then we're going to take the elevation up, and we're going to put a few level 2 peaks on here as well. Okay, let's actually had one a bit higher, so let's make this level 3. Go all the way up to level 3 there. And every different level will create a slightly different color. So that's your basic hills. And now we're going to do forest, which is the next things that we usually include. So if I go to woods, you now got this value here that we can start adding. So if I click on this value here, we can have woods 1, which is light woods, woods 2, which is heavy, and woods 3, which is ultra heavy woods. So we're just going to start with some light woods. And once you've clicked on that, you just basically click on add terrain, and it adds it to this box and updates this window here, showing you what it's going to look like. And now if I don't keep Control held down, it doesn't matter what elevation this is set on, it will just allow me to paint that woods onto anywhere I want without updating the elevation. Here we go. So I'm just going to create a few coppices of woods. A few odd ones here and there. Let's have quite thick woods over here. And now I can go back now, and I can change this by changing that to 2. Now it won't change it automatically here. You've got to again hit add set terrain, and now it updates it. So let's put in a couple of heavier woods just here and there, and it replaces the lighter woods. Just writes over the top of them. And then just to show it, we've got our ultra heavy woods here, which instantly block line of sight. There we go. So those are the woods. Now a really useful technique to use in map construction is if you hold down the Alt key and then you click on a hex, you copy the features of that hex into the terrain box. So if I want to go back to light woods, I can hold down Alt, click on that, and now I can get back to light woods. Or I can hold down Alt, click on the heavy woods, and it'll go to that one. So that's really, really useful. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at adding to this a building. Now buildings can be quite tricky. So every single building needs to have at least 3 fields added to it. So first of all, I'm going to remove this. You could leave it there actually. You could have woods on a building as well. But we're just going to have a building on its own. So we're going to go to building, and we've got building, this one, and you've got to have this, and it's important to have this field itself. So you can have building 1, which is light, building 2, medium, building 3, heavy, building 4, hardened. So we're going to go for building 1 and create some light buildings here. And I need to add that. I then need to do building armor is optional, enables you to add armor up to the construction factor of the, or depending on the building rules, which are in TAC ops. Building base collapse is just to do with basements. That what happens if the basement is collapsed. If there is a basement there, you can include the basement, and the number of levels are again by updating this. But we're not going to have any basements; it's optional. Building CF isn't optional; you've got to have this, and so light are 0 to 15. So I'm going to add that, and now it's updated it. If I want to change it later, I could actually change that to say if it was a very light building, I could just, again, it would update that value. But I'm going to put it back to 15. And then the last thing that's mandatory is building elevation. So building elevation, we're going to have a level 1 building. So that's the basic building parameters. So if I go and start painting a building onto here, if I put those buildings down, I get these nice light buildings here that are separate. But if I click on a building and put another building next to it, it automatically joins them into another building like this. This shape you can't change. You can just say it's present in this entire hex, but it kind of predetermines this shape. What you can do though is a little trick. So again, if I do this here, say I didn't want one large building, I want it to look like there was 3 separate buildings, just for aesthetic's sake. I could do something a little bit more tricky. I can go over to here and I can go to building, and I can do this thing where it says add exits, and you've got this button here, and I can put in a value of 1 here. Now this is usually used for roads, but it's got this little trick in map building where it enables you to set a building type and make it a different value. So actually will appear, if I put it at 0, I'll just show you. If you click add terrain, it becomes building 1:0. Now when it's got colons here, it won't join them up together, it will keep them separate. Now when you've got building 1, or whatever level it is, but building :0, it creates the basic building at a level 1 height, and each different type of building has a different appearance. So level 2 type 2 buildings, which is medium buildings, they look like this. Level 3 buildings, which is heavy buildings, they look like this. And level 4 buildings, which is hardened buildings, they look like this. But what's important is they won't all join together to one building while you've got this value on 0. If you wanted them all join together, you just have to click off of that. Again, I'll update it on here. So now the :0 has disappeared, and now if I click together, it will actually form into larger and larger buildings. Okay, so that's buildings for you, and we're going to look at a couple of the more complicated things in buildings in a sec. But let's next look at something else. Let's look at water. So if I go down to water here, and I can just set the depth. What I need to do is remove these first. So I can actually just remove those from the terrain box. Notice it says invalid here, because if you don't have all 3 of those descriptors in a building, it won't work. It has to have those 3 minimum descriptors, and then it can have extras. So I'm going to choose water, and this box now becomes the depth of water. So we're going to have a level 1 water. We're going to create a small lake here, and I'm going to add that to the terrain. So there's some level 1 water, and again what's nice about this is it changes the colour. So if I now create a level 2 water, it shades that a little bit more, and level 3 would be even deeper colour. So that's a nice way of creating this different effects here that you can obviously see. So that's water. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at some of these others. So rough, which is very easy. Rough just has a value of 1. You can't do anything else, so I'm going to remove that from here and just add some rough terrain. Need to add it first. There we go. Need to have rough 1. I think rough 2 might be ultra rough. Or ultra rubble. I think rubble is actually a different title actually. So there's the rough terrain, and that's just, we've got rubble as well. Rubble, you can have ultra rubble, which is like level 2 rubble. So I'm going to remove that. So you can stack these things together. So we're going to do rubble. There we go, rubble 1. And if I want ultra heavy rubble, I can close that to 2. And that creates an even denser rubble field, mainly for buildings. So rough is kind of like your rocks, rocky outcroppings, where rubble is more tendency to collapse buildings. And when you collapse buildings in the game, you actually get them replaced by the rubble here. Roads is a little bit more tricky. So we're going to have a look at how to create a road and how to change the road's directions to go in different ways. So roads are an overlay which go over the top of other hexes. So what you can have under roads could be, you could have plains, you could have pavement, you could have all sorts of things under the roads. You can even have woods under the roads. And the key thing with roads is, this is just going to be 1. It doesn't matter what value this is, but just set it to 1, is the exits. So you click on the add exits and then click on the A. And this enables you to generate what exits, what side hexes the road is going to go from. So we're going to have a road going from 4 to 1. So it's going to go diagonally from 4 to 1. Creates a little code here as well that sometimes you can just remember, but I find it easy just to click A and select it manually like this. And I'm going to start the road here. But when we get to here, I want a junction, so I'd like it to go up. So I'm going to again go to road, and I'm going to click on A, and I'm going to select O, and we're going to have it go down to 3 as well. So there's our junction. And now I can go back, but instead of typing it again, I can just hold down Alt and click on the hex, and it'll copy that tile, and I can just carry on going. I can go through the woods, but I need to maintain the woods as well, because if I click on there, it'll overwrite it. But say I want that wood still to be there, I can actually put some woods in here. So woods level 1, add terrain, there we go. So I've now got a wooded road here. And again, if I hold down Alt, I can click on that, and I can go up to here. So that's our basic road. I'm going to change the direction again, go from 0 to 3, and let's have the road going up. Oh, do that again, sorry. So click on road, and we'll have the road going from 0 to 3, and just have the road going up and down. You can create more intersections as well. One thing to say actually when you're thinking about your map size is in normal Battletech maps they have a half hex either side on the left and the right, and they go from 1 to 15, but in MegaMek they don't have the half size hexes, and they go from 1 to 16. So if you're trying to convert maps over and do it manually, which you might want to do for maps you have that aren't already in MegaMek, then that makes it slightly different to how it is. But that also enables you to design maps that don't have those annoying kind of thoroughfares that enable you just to walk down the middle of map seams without any terrain. So that's our basic road construction. Not very good city planning here, but just shows you how to do the roads. We're then going to just go and add in some different features, and this time we're going to add in, we've got some pavement, and if I want to, for instance, say put pavement around this building, I'm going to first hold down Alt and click on the building to get the features of that building up here, and then I can add pavement to it. So there, now it's got pavement, and there we go. Another useful option here is for the road. So again, if I click on the road, you've got this option where it says enable roads to pavement. So I click on that. That changes one of the properties there that enables that to go onto the pavement. So those are all really the basic map features that you need to make any map. What I'm going to do there is just have a look at some of the more advanced things. I'm going to start with buildings, and if I click on our building here that we've created, oh, did that wrong. Hold down Alt, not Windows key. There we go. So we've got this building here, and this time I want to instead change some of the features. I'm going to make it into a different type of building. So down here you've got building class. So building class can be one of 3 different values. If you leave it blank, it's just a regular building. Otherwise, there are 3 different types of building. Now, let's see if I can remember this. Type 1, I think, is a hangar. So that's again from the tactical operation rules, which enables you to get different types of effects when you walk through them, and also their effectiveness of damage on them. Type 2 is fortress, and type 3 is gun emplacement. Gun emplacement's quite tough because gun emplacements take half damage, but you can't enter them. So those are the 3 different types. Fortress could be quite useful for doing walls. Gun emplacement's quite useful again for doing gun towers, and 0 for standard, or just not putting anything in there. So for instance, if I wanted to use these things and create a gun emplacement, I'm going to put down 3. I'm going to make it, update that, and where it says building elevation here, I'm going to click on building elevation. I'm going to make it a level 2, update that. So we've got building elevation 1, building class 3, gun tower. It's on pavement. It's a light building, building type 1. It's elevation of 2, and it's got 15 construction factor. So now I'm building up quite a few different things here. It says it's invalid for some reason. What am I missing? Building elevation 1, building class 3. I think for gun emplacements they need to be... oh no, I've clicked bridge. This is often a mistake we do here. Obviously it's not working there because I've selected bridge elevation rather than building elevation. So I'll just remove that and go for building elevation 2. There we go. So I'm going to click here, and because it's a different class, it won't add to this building, it will be separate. So we're going to have this gun turret here, and it doesn't change the graphic for it though, so that's one thing to bear in mind, but it has changed the properties for how it's going to interact in MegaMek, and what damage it's going to take. I can even make that a tougher gun turret. I could add to that building armor and put 15 armor points on it as well, and then overwrite that. That gives it 15 points of armor now. And there are a whole variety of different things you can do to the buildings there. You can give it basements, etc. I think that's the only main ones you need to really get going. So hangars is quite useful if you want to create a mech hangar. But again, those are from TAC Ops, so if you don't want to, you can just create buildings just with the normal building things. Remember, you need the 3 things. You need building CF, and you need building elevation. Those are the only 3 features you need for a building to work. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at another more advanced feature. We're going to have a look at fuel tank, which is really fun. So I'm going to remove all of the terrain here. So let's just remove these. Fuel tanks are exactly the same as buildings, except when they're destroyed they explode. So if I create a fuel tank 1, which is a light fuel tank, and it says invalid at the moment because I need 3 features like the buildings. I'm going to create a fuel tank with 15. Okay, so that's construction factor 15. So 15 hits where it explodes. It's elevation. I'm going to make it a 1 level fuel tank. And then last of all, for fuel tanks to work, you need magnitude. Now I couldn't find this anywhere in the rules, and someone helped me out to what this means. Magnitude 10 means it'll do 10 damage within 1 hex. Magnitude 20, it'll do 10 damage within 1 hex. 20 damage within 1 hex and 10 damage within the next hex. 30 is 30, 20, 10. 40 is really cataclysmic. 40, 30, 20, 10, and so on. If you did this really big, apparently there's a risk it might crash because you do so much damage to everything on the table. It has to do so much maths, it can cause a problem. But basically it does this in groups of 5 when it applies it. So this is good for things like, well, fuel tanks obviously, for generators, if you wanted like a petrochemical generator that's powering stuff in your base, you could have that. So here's our fuel tank. Love the way it looks. There you go. And if you click on more than one though, it becomes this building, and again you can stop that from happening by where it says fuel tank here, just like the same way we did with buildings, is add exit 0, so that becomes 1:0, and now when I click on it, it'll look like 2 separate fuel tanks. So that's really good for just getting that aesthetics. Lots of these fuel tanks around here on these farms, lots of diesel just lying around. Well, diesel wouldn't explode, but natural gas, there we go, biogas generators. So that's fuel tanks, which are great fun because tactically you don't really want to go anywhere near them. You especially don't want to use them for cover or stand on them, which is a really good way of being launched into orbit when they get detonated. So the last thing we're going to look at is adding some fluff, quite literally the fluff option. So the fluff option enables you to take any tile and add some interesting things to it, and it is a bit tricky and you have to look into the manual for how to do this, but I'll give you a couple of pieces of fluff that are quite useful. So the first, if I go down to fluff, okay, first thing I'm going to show you is something silly, which is just cows. So if I go to fluff and put category 6 and have a 1 here. Oh, that's not, sorry, it's category 13 for the cows. Here we go. So these are different animals, and there's cows. I can change this to 2. Horses. 3. Chickens. Every good mech fight needs some chickens. And some bison. So, really, really silly. Has no effect on the game. They don't seem to mind mechs walking through them. But another piece of fluff that's quite nice are the one I just accidentally showed you, which was category 6, which is skylights. So 1 is this skylight orientation. So if I want to put this skylight on here, it will overwrite. So I don't want to do that. I want to actually hold down Alt, click on the hex to get the categories, then add that terrain, the fluff terrain, to here. So I'm going to add the selected terrain, and now when I click on that, it should give me the thing, which it hasn't. Oh no, because I need to click on that add exits. Add exits 1, and that needs to be a 6. There we go. There. So if I click on that now, it overwrites the fluff onto that. You can do 1 to 6 is just 6 orientations for this. Category 7 is this kind of like roof decoration that looks like this. Sometimes it can look a bit out of place. Category 13 or 12, I think, is these awnings, which you can get in different orientations as well. So there are lots of these different bits of things to play with. I haven't got a definitive list of all of these, but there is a list if you go to a particular file, which I'll try and include on the description for the video. And the other one that I really like for this is the roads one and the helipad one. So Fluff 2, category 1, I think, if I remember rightly. Let's just select, don't want to see the weather. Let's select a grassland hex and go to Fluff 2, category 1. That creates a heliport. And then there's 2, which just creates that heliport. 3 are beacons, and 4 is another type of beacon. So it's useful for games where you're doing, there is no 5, games where you're doing some sort of you know, move your mechs within a certain space, or just to look cool. So we have a helipad on top of this building. If I want a helipad on top of this building, I can just click Alt to get the properties of the building, and then I can just add to that the helipad, which was 2, 1. There we go. So now I can just add the helipad in the middle of that building. So Fluff 1, I think, was cars. Just gonna have a look. No, it's not 1. It must be a different number. 3. I think it's just best just to play around with these and try to work out. Oh, there's ornamental pools, which is an interesting one. 5 is cars. So there's loads of ones with cars that they match. They don't give any terrain options, so you've got to match it to these. So if you've got to click on the hex, say let's have the properties of this hex here, and then I want some cars on it. So then I've got to go to the fluff, and I've got to choose the appropriate one. And you've got to remember that this tile is going to be underneath the fluff tile. So now let's do it as 1, fluff 3, 1. Is it fluff 4, 1? That's 5, isn't it? 5 plus 5, 1. There we go. But now that road won't actually be there in the game, so I've got to actually change the orientation by changing his number here. There we go. Now we've got the correct orientation, and there's the road underneath. So again, I can just paint in some cars here. So again, you can do lots of little things just to make the map look a little bit different. And there are some really, interesting and crazy maps you can do with this, using the impassable terrain, using the space option. There are lots of different options that you can do to create different effects. So I hope that's been useful, and I'll include a link to a document which includes what most of the options do, and secondly I'll include a document which also has links to the fluff, so you know what the different fluff settings are. So finishing off there, hope you enjoy creating lots of maps and destroying lots of mechs on them. And of course, when you destroy mechs, you'll have lots of arms. Let's put some arms on. And remove. I almost forgot to do arms. So you go arms. We have 2 arms. And legs. And we'll have can't do my alphabet anymore. There we go. Legs. as legs. There we go. Legs. So I have 2 arms, 2 legs. And again, doesn't serve any purpose. Not sure if you can actually pick these up in the game and use them as clubs. So there we go. Enjoy making lots of maps.